Dead Again is a 1991 release neo-noir thriller directed by Kenneth Branagh.
Yeah, Kenneth Branagh also stars as a private detective by the name of Mike Church. And usually he specialises in finding missing persons, and he's kind of got his work cut out for him with a mute amnesiac to find out who she is, where she's from, what happened to her. She's having a recurring nightmare of being murdered with scissors. During the course of his investigation, they wind up having some hypnosis done on her, which regresses her back to, what possibly is a previous life in which a famous pianist was murdered by her composer husband. And is this really her past life? Is this a dream? What's going on?
What is going on? Exactly. It's clearly a film that owes a debt to the films of the 1940s and 50s. There's kind of, there's famous noir films of that time, Double Indemnity, and great films. We've done a couple. We did Scarlet Street on the channel, which is a darker noir from that period. And The Hitcher, do you remember that one? Which was kind of a noir, which we did during lockdown. That was a good one. So yeah, there's obviously
Hitchhiker.
Hitchhiker.
Yeah, because The Hitcher.
The Hitcher is the Hitchers, which we also did on the channel.
Yeah,
go and check those out. And then we also kind of thought we'd do this one because, of course, The Haunting in Venice has just come out, also directed and starring Kenneth Branagh, which I went to see. I won't, obviously this is not a review of Haunting in Venice, but I'll quickly, so I saw the Murder on the Orient Express that he did, which I really enjoyed. I thought that was really good. And then I saw Death on the Nile, which was not as good. And then I just saw this Haunting in Venice a week ago. It wasn't great. I was quite bored by it. I think the trouble with it, and I won't go into detail with it, but I thought there's a scene right at the beginning of the film, right, where Poirot is retired,
right,
and he's having a holiday in Venice, and he's got this henchman with him. He goes on a walk through the beautiful, picturesque city of Venice, possibly why they filmed it there, and his henchman follows him, and then as soon as he leaves his apartment, line of people outside his flat, and they all come running up to him. Mr. Poirot, can you help me? My cousin was murdered in mysterious ways, or is missing, or this and that. Poirot is not interested because he's retired, and he carries on walking. And there's a shot, they go over a bridge, and these people follow him, and his henchman knocks this guy over the bridge into the canal. I didn't believe that Poirot, this world-renowned private detective and ex-policeman, that he'd allow his henchman to knock a poor defenceless man into the canal. He might not be able to swim, he might drown, and then he'd have to solve that murder. Obvious who did it. And it just didn't convince me that the character of Poirot, who is obviously not made up for this film, he's world famous, he was written by Agatha Christie, and I think that too, the fact that it's odd because obviously that this Haunting in Venice is based on The Halloween Party, which is another story by Agatha Christie. But Kenneth Branagh has kind of taken Poirot out of that story and put it in his own story, which kind of feels a bit self-indulgent. And I think that's the trouble I have with a lot of Kenneth Branagh films. And I think that's a slight problem with this film, Dead Again, which I actually really enjoyed. I thought it was better than Haunting in Venice. And I like a lot of Kenneth Branagh's films. But I think he is a bit self-indulgent at times. I mean, look, he literally directs himself in most of his films. And obviously before this, he'd made Henry V, which I think was his first film that he directed. He was a stage actor before that. But since then, majority of his films, Peter's Friends that we did on the channel.
Did Frankenstein,
Much Ado About Nothing. He's done a whole host, not all of them, but he's done a whole host of films that he has starred in himself. And I think that happens quite a bit where directors direct themselves. I think that can lead to a little bit of self-indulgence. And that's not always a bad thing. Here they have a lot of fun with the setting and the period and the nods back to the noir of the 40s and the 50s. I just found for me in Haunting in Venice, it didn't work because it's such a famous writer who writes these incredible novels, but you're taking that character and you're putting it in your own story. And it didn't work, and I was bored with it, and it was kind of trying to be horror and also trying to be a murder mystery, and it didn't work for me, unfortunately. But yeah, so back to this film. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I saw it years ago, I think, when it was still relatively new in the 90s. So there are a couple of twists, one of which I remembered partway through the film, so I ruined it for myself. As you say, when he made this, he was hot off Henry V, and I think, that was critically acclaimed, and I think it won some Oscars and stuff. So he was riding high off that acclaim, and apparently they were sent loads of scripts to read, and this one stood out to him. And it wasn't written for the Mike Church and Grace. They weren't supposed to be played by the same actors as the characters in the past, Margaret and Roman, but he thought that would be a good idea.
Right,
I mean, apparently when some people read the script, that's what they assumed, that they were going to be played by the same people, because it is past lives, so it wouldn't be a complete stretch for them to look the same. But yeah, he wanted to do both parts. Because I listened to the bits of the commentary on the disc. He had a very firm idea on what he wanted to do with it. So, for example, the bits in the past in the film, they're all black and white. But they weren't filmed like that. I think in the script the script said they were in black and white, but he didn't want to do that. He wanted to do it in colour. And then when they tested it, people were confused by what time period they were watching, even though obviously everyone's in period costume and there's old cars and things like that. But I don't know, obviously the test audiences got confused, so they changed it all and made it black and white, which obviously annoyed all the production designers who would done all these wonderful costumes and beautiful colours, and then all the colour was sapped out of them. And of course, they would have created costumes and props and lit it for black and white if they'd known what it was going to be. Anyway, for me, you were saying you got a bit bored during Haunted in Venice. I think it sagged a bit in the middle, this. A couple of the black and white scenes do drag on a bit. Obviously they're giving us information, but I think maybe that could have been done a bit quicker, or they could have cut back and forth a bit more, which towards the end of the film they do. They do utilise that and cut back and forth between present day and the past. But in the middle, there's a couple of quite lengthy scenes in the past.
I mean, I enjoyed it, and I think Kenneth Branagh and Emma Thompson, who were married at this point, they were clearly enjoying themselves immensely. Derek Jacobi was in there. It's quite a British heavy cast. I mean, you've got Robin Williams in there and Wayne Knight. He's got an amazing kind of whistle when he speaks, which I really enjoyed. Robin Williams, not there that much, but he's quite convincing in the scenes that he is in. I mean, it is a nod to the films of the past. It's clearly a nod. I mean, I think even the house that Kenneth Branagh's character lives in is the house in Double Indemnity. So there are certainly nods to those films, but it's nowhere near as, I mean, those films, I think there's often people think of, films from the 40s and 50s as quite melodramatic, which a lot of them were, but I don't think the noir films were. I think some of them may have been, but a lot of the famous noir films are quite hard-hitting, for their time. They're dark and they've got, quite nasty characters in them. A lot of them have got, alcoholism, drug taking, which maybe not there on screen, but it's often assumed. They're dark films. This is a melodrama. And this is very theatrical. Obviously, that comes from Kenneth Branagh's background. He was a stage actor. And you certainly get that here, right down to some of there are shots of people leaving rooms, which just feel like an actor leaving the stage. It's just kind of, it feels like a theatre production is. I think that kind of takes away the kind of the heaviness of the plot and the darkness of the plot. It's quite a dark plot, but it is melodramatic and gothic, as opposed to kind of hard-hitting, like some of those noir films were. And I think that leads it to sag at times. But I think Kenneth Branagh loves acting. I think he really enjoys the art of it. And he's clearly having a lot of fun playing Poirot. He's kind of like, he feels, that's kind of the role he was made to play. And he's really enjoying it. And you have to give him credit for that. And he's clearly enjoying himself here. And I think what's interesting is when he's playing Mike, he's very kind of friendly and happy, but when he's playing Roman, he's got a kind of a darker history. And it's clear, and you're convinced that both those characters are different. They're different people, and I think he does that really well. And so, yes, I think there are times that this does sag a little bit, but it's got some really wonderful stuff in there.
Yeah.
There's a really great scene between him and Miriam Margolyes, like right early on in the film. And it's not very long, but it had me in stitches. It was so funny, and because she's this crazy, crazy person, and she does it so well. And I thought that had me laughing the whole way through it.
I think that's its strength. Is the cast.
It's the cast.
I mean, some of the performances maybe stray into the sort of hammy territory
a little bit,
but you kind of forgive it. I mean, it does fall into some of the sort of 90s neo-noir tropes. I mean, his car, for example. These people. I mean, it's the same. In cop films, neo-noir, detective films, they always have sort of a car that stands out. And I guess that's to make them stand out, but it just feels like it's been done a million times before. And it's always some little convertible sports car.
Always.
So,
Yeah.
why? And the other thing is the fact that she starts the film off mute. There's no real reason for that, although listening to the commentary, it's more of a dramatic choice because they, she doesn't know anything about herself, and neither does anybody else. They were struggling to sort of give her interesting lines to say rather than just yes and no. So they got rid of that problem by just making her mute until we discover, and she discovers a bit more about herself.
Right, okay.
Because after I finished, I thought, what was the point of her being mute? It didn't really make any difference. There was no purpose to it. But it was, there was no purpose to the plot, but there was a purpose for dramatic
tension. Maybe like you say, and I read this a little bit myself on IMDb, you were saying that obviously it went through quite a few test screenings. I suppose test screenings happen a lot with films anyway, but if your entire film goes through quite a few of those processes and you're having to churn it around and pick bits out and reshoot things and all that kind of stuff, then maybe the film's going to feel a little bit put together in that way. Not as, you get a great film that just works from the word go, and you have a great... obviously, Kenneth Branagh was new to it. He'd made Henry V, which was a huge success. But obviously that's Shakespeare, and that's probably the world he came from.
Yeah, that's his wheelhouse, isn't it?
Exactly. So maybe that makes it feel a bit saggy at times. I don't know. It's one of those films that perhaps wouldn't work if it didn't have the cast it had. But there are at times... Andy Garcia is in the film as well. And he comes back later in the film, and his makeup just kind of reminds me of that kind of silly 90s makeup, which is a bit cartoonish.
Yeah.
It kind of reminded me of, there's a film with Dan Aykroyd where he plays like an old man. He's got all this horrible, this crazy makeup on. I can't remember what film it was. I think it's got John Candy in it and Demi Moore.
I don't know.
Yeah, anyway. But I think he's in this kind of old man makeup, which at the time looks a little bit caricaturized, and a bit cartoonish and a bit silly. I think it doesn't take itself too seriously, this film. And that always helps when you are making a slightly nonsense, silly film.
Yeah, there are moments of humour in there, which I think is pitched just about right. It's not, it's not going for massive laughs, but it lightens the tone a little bit.
Absolutely.
For some scenes. If you like those sort of 90s thrillers, like, around this time there was all sorts of stuff like that coming out, like Basic Instinct and Pacific Heights and The Rock the Cradle and all that stuff. And they were huge back then. If you like all those, then there's no reason why you wouldn't buy into it. Because a lot of those have ridiculous premises and plots. This is quite a high concept thing, with past lives and things like that.
This is. I would say Basic Instinct is perhaps more closer to the noirs of that period. That's a neo-noir, but it's obviously a more adult neo-noir, which is, like I said before, the noirs of that period were... although they weren't, rated 18 like you get films now, because you couldn't do things like that in those days, they are more adult films back then. This is more melodramatic. This is a lot more theatrical. And I also think, if you like murder mysteries, he's obviously, now that seems to be all he's doing at the moment. He clearly has a love for the murder mystery. And this is a murder mystery. Yeah. It's a private detective trying to solve something.
Even though at the start we think we know who's done it. Yeah. Maybe they did. Maybe they didn't. And there's twists and turns, which Agatha Christie does a lot. So in a way, he's almost done the Agatha Christie thing before. Possibly, I thought this was more enjoyable than what he does with Agatha Christie. But it's because it's new. It's not a story that's been done before, and other people have, obviously a lot of people would say David Suchet is the Poirot. There's probably people that would disagree with it. Obviously Peter Ustinov played him as well, and Albert Finney in the old film of Murder on the Orient Express. So everyone's going to have their favourite Poirot. David Suchet obviously did him the most, so that's probably why he's become quite iconic at it. And I think this is his kind of stab, excuse the pun, at that murder mystery story before he then went on to do Poirot. So I if you enjoy those kind of films, bit of neo-noir, bit of early 90s thriller nonsense with a bit of murder mystery in there. And a really enjoyable cast.
That
really helps it. Robin Williams, for example, he's basically Basil Exposition. He has three scenes, and they're all exposition. But because it's Robin Williams, because he was a great actor, and he delivers it perfectly, you don't really notice that he's giving you loads of information. No, it's just a pleasure to see him on screen.
Have you got it on Blu-ray?
Yep, I picked it up. It's not. I think you can rent it and that from Amazon. I found the Blu-ray on eBay for £10. or just under a tenner, so I thought I'd pick it up.
Is that an American?
Yeah, it's not been released in the UK on Blu-ray.
Right.
I think it was released in Australia as well by Imprint, and that had, I mean, this has got 2 commentaries on it in the trailer. That had the same, but also had a featurette on it as well. I mean, it's not the prettiest Blu-ray I've ever watched. This, you know, it's got speckles and spots and marks and stuff like that on a bit of telecine wobble as well. You know, it was fine. And it was, I gleaned some interesting facts from the commentaries as well. One with Kenneth Branagh and one with Lindsay Doran and Scott Frank, who were the producer and the screenwriter. There's a lot of stuff that you don't pick up on, like names and just little things that are clues throughout the film that maybe you don't notice the first time. Obviously, don't want to spoil it, so don't. If you haven't seen it, don't concentrate too hard. I think you might figure it out.
But I have to say, we don't often talk about posters. I really like the posters.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Yeah,
I think it's really iconic with the, it's just the kind of the double face in there. And it's one of those things you like. You know those pictures where you get like where they do like a face and then they put double eyes or triple eyes and it makes you go, oh. It's not quite as bad as that, but it's got this kind of, you're looking at 2 faces but you're looking at one face. It's cleverly done, and I think it really stands out, and I think that probably maybe helped in its advertising as well. But it's got a great poster on it, and so an enjoyable romp.
Nothing earth-shattering, but it passes the time, and it was it did what it set out to do. And if you haven't seen it, then there's a couple of good twists in there. I mean, like me, if you've seen it before, then I don't know how much rewatch value it's got because once you know the twist, there's no mystery left.
So that was Dead Again, and as always, if you enjoyed the video, let us know in the comments below.
Hit the subscribe button up there, and don't forget to push the bell for notifications. There's other videos to check out either side of us, and join us again soon for another video.